Just to start out with, we've already had a review, Flagstaff Dark Sky Coalition. You know what we're here for. This is our vision, our newly um revised vision, I guess we should say. And this is what we think about dark skies and people's ability to look up and see the Milky Way and other things. But part of our vision statement does have this line it of and beneficial for all life. So we're going to be looking at this second part of the major idea. I've given a lot of presentations about man-made light at night and the natural world, and so some of these things I've repeated a lot of times to conservation organizations and things like that. But talking about the concept of environmental disruption, it's very easy, I think, for anybody to consider taking a natural area like this meadow and turning it into a shopping mall, and you realize you're talking about environmental disruption there. This is a clear-cut example. You've taken a natural situation and made it very unnatural. What, as a culture, we really are still very lacking in is the concept of taking any sort of area that has natural daylight in the day and natural nighttime darkness at night and taking away that nighttime darkness by putting man-made light into it. In reality, from many parts of the ecosystem's point of view, this is as disruptive as paving over the meadow, or damming the stream, or lots of other things that we already think of as obvious disruption. So this is what we're going to briefly look into now, is the ideas of this. And one of the things I've often done in talking to conservation organizations about this is asking the audience to, in their own minds, each person to picture a natural environment, that their favorite one or someplace they've been or worked or whatever, and then be prepared to describe it. And so people will come up with all sorts of answers: that meadow, a desert, you name it, the mountain range, the jungle. And after I've given them a minute to think about that, I ask them, okay, in that picture in your mind, what time of day is it? And I've never had anybody tell me that they pictured their natural environment at night. It's always the daytime and the sun is up. And just by making people think about that, I've had a lot of people really scratch their heads and say, wow, I'd never stopped to think that my favorite natural environment is always in the daytime. But we're really diurnal. Humans are evolved to be up in the daytime and sleeping at night. And so we think of the natural environment as being daytime. But of course, that's not true as far as the Earth and everything else living on it is. For the entire history of living things on Earth, half of the natural environment has been nighttime. That averages out, of course. When you're in the temperate zone, the night's longer in the winter and shorter in the summer, but it all averages out to about half, through the year. The only exceptions, as far as living areas that don't follow this, are the deep depths of the oceans, or in caves, or for living things that spend their entire life cycle entirely underground, where they're never in any of those cages get any daylight at all. But again, for the vast majority of living organisms on the planet, this has always been the case. So what is the importance of night out in nature? Well, in any ecosystem, the night is as active as the daytime. We think of being up in the daytime and sleeping at night. The rest of the living things on the planet don't think of it that way. Even the plants, even the trees and things, yes, they're soaking up sunshine in the daytime and photosynthesizing. Well, they're not shut off and frozen at night. They're doing a lot of things at night too. So they're actually making use of that food that they stored up, or that they created out of sunlight during the daytime. They're still growing in things at night. They're respirating. They're still pumping water. And it's true about every other living thing. When you get into higher life forms, if you want to consider animals to be higher than plants, which really isn't very fair, but um, there's just as much
Here, here.
activity in the
Here, here from the
here.
botanists
There
on
we
the line.
go. Yeah, I'm not much at prioritize. My family tree is more like a big mossy bed that spreads out horizontally. It doesn't go up to some pinnacle. But anyway, um, there's as many things creeping and crawling, flying and eating and mating and migrating and everything at night as during the daytime. Very true. The other major important factor of night is that it's the opposite of day, and the night-day cycle entrains the circadian rhythm. So almost every living thing on the planet, even some things in caves and stuff, but just about everything that's exposed to the day-night cycle entrains that in its own physiology. Everything from bacteria to the plants and the animals and the mushrooms even have day-night cycles, and those day-night cycles are only there because of the fact that for millions of years, or billions of years, I'm sorry, it's been light in the day and dark at night. So that 24-hour cycle is deeply entrained in many, many living things on the planet. And again, if it's entrained because of the day-night cycle and you take away the day-night cycle, you can create problems. So again, this is a really key concept. We as human beings who have mastered this thing of making artificial light, from having a campfire and a torch to having a candle or an oil lamp or a light bulb, we think we're defeating that night and breaking it, but you can't break these systems that took billions of years to evolve by throwing a monkey wrench into it. So you don't remaster things by doing that. So it's a really important concept to consider. So again, coming back to the concept of environmental disruption, I have been looking into the biology of light pollution for a long time. I have collected, actually, I'm sure over 1,000 different studies and papers. It's kind of self-contradicting for me to say that it's a subject that isn't studied enough, because that is true, and then I'm turn around and say I probably got thousands of papers addressing it. But considering the millions of different things we share the planet with, a couple thousand studies is not really very in depth. But what I found probably as the best meta study of it all is, in all of these papers that I've read, I've only found one that didn't find significant effect from dumping artificial light into a natural environment. That one it wasn't looking at that. It was a study of penguins in South America. You know, they're penguins that come up to the southern coast of South America. And as a side note, they noted there didn't seem to be any change in their behavior where there was artificial light. Otherwise, out of these thousands of studies, every one of them found significant effects to the ecosystems or the organisms studied, the plants or animals studied. So whenever we've looked and asked that question, it's like, oh yeah, man-made light at night does do things. So that goes to reminding us of this fact in the little paragraph here, that 30% of all vertebrate animals and 60% of all vertebrates are nocturnal. They're evolved to have their active cycle be during the night. That includes 90% of all amphibians, 95% of all bats, 60% of all mammals. I find the 90% of amphibians and 95% of bats to be sort of telling if you were a study of conservation now, or a student of conservation, you might recognize that both amphibians and bats are in massive and rapid decline all around the world and on every continent where they exist. I'm not saying that there's a one-to-one correlation here, but gosh, it's a suspicious looking thing. Could this be part of the problem of the stress we're putting on these animals by making them not have night anymore, these nocturnal animals. So moving forward, what did I put next? Oh, this is the one you don't have to sit and read the entire thing, but I thought it was important to lay out just briefly, just touch upon the actual demonstrated mechanics of what we're talking about in this disruption of the night. So in the yellow, the highlighted things are the different factors that are dependent on a bright day and a dark night cycle. The circadian rhythm I already noted. The seasonal day length change, especially in the temperate parts of the globe, but even getting fairly close to the equator, you have seasonality that's triggered by the fact that the daylight hours are longer in the summertime and shorter in the wintertime. That cycle affects a lot of living things. The visual response in animals, I mean, the next few are in animals. If you are evolved to live under nothing brighter than moonlight and or starlight and a periodic moonlight, your eyesight, your visual acuity is going to be balanced for it being dark. And if it never gets dark, that can be disruptive. Visual signaling is the same thing. If the animals are seeing each other at night in the dark and you add man-made light, you may be screwing that up. The classic example of that would be fireflies, which are signaling using light and fairly faint light at that. And if you have a brighter light around, that signaling is no longer effective. But there are definitely other cases where coloration at night or motion at night the detection is based on the idea that it's dark out, and adding a brighter light can disrupt that. Navigational tools is a big thing too. Again, classically you can go to birds, but there's a lot of other things that fly around at night or walk around at night or migrate at night or swim at night. And if their navigation is based on seeing the stars or seeing the difference between sky and ground with nighttime levels, when you add man-made light, you can screw that up. Classic example of that is your hatching sea turtles coming out on the beaches and heading inland instead of out to the ocean, because they're looking for the signal of the sky over the ocean being lighter than the ocean, and they see the much brighter lights back on land and get messed up by that. But there are, again, many other examples. So the next one is harder to explain and not really well understood, but it's been well demonstrated that when you come to animals again, some are very attracted to light at night and others are very repelled by light at night. In any case, the artificial light at night is disrupting natural behavior. So, and then the last one, the lunar calendar is a big thing here on Earth because we have this huge moon that very regularly, periodically goes through the sky at night at different phases at different times. And there's a lot of living things which are geared to that calendar and to that signal of the moonlight. Well, if you have other brights that compete with other lights that compete with moonlight, it can definitely disrupt that the reception of that signal. So here are actual explanations of ways that turning on a light at night just goof things up out in nature. So again, every one of those systems can be disrupted by tossing man-made light into the package. So how do we reduce this environmental disruption? Well, these things should sound very familiar. This is what we talk about for dark sky preservation. If we use lights outdoors at night or indoors shining outdoors, shining to the outside, the light should be directed so it only goes where it's needed. We talk about that in dark sky protection by talking about shielding fixtures and having them directed downward and not directed upward. Ideally, from the natural conservation point of view, things should be even stricter. Light should not only be not above the horizontal, they should be focused entirely down where they belong, or off to where they belong, whichever side, direction, whatever angle, and nothing beyond that. So the moths would be even pickier than we are as stargazers. Create no more light than is needed. That's simple enough. Flagstaff has its luminal ounces. A lot of other places have tried various sorts of types of saying no brighter than is needed, and only when it's needed. Simple enough. Don't have them on where there's nobody there. Don't even put them up where they're really not effective, and then turn them off later in the night or whenever they're not needed. Again, these are all core things to keeping your sky dark too. It's the same thing for keeping stray light out and unnecessary light and light pollution, as it were, out from the natural world too. This one definitely gets added on to the reducing environmental disruption. Many of these different factors, these disruptive factors, are vary with the color of the light, with the spectral quality of the light. And unfortunately, when you get to nature, if you want to start talking about 500,000 or 1 million different species, you're going to have a lot of different responses, and they're not all going to be the same. But there are some trends that are going to start to sound a little familiar too. Again, we're talking about living things that have evolved here on Earth. And here on Earth, it turns out that if you want to talk about daylight, the sky is blue, and daylight tends toward the blue. Even on a cloudy day, daylight tends toward the blue. So a lot of circadian response and a lot of other physiological responses and physical behavioral responses are triggered more by shorter wavelength light, because that's what comes in abundance when the sun is up, when the day is clear, and is absent to a great extent at night. It's especially notable and understandable in animals. See if I can get my slide to change. There's a photoreceptive chemical, I guess you could say, called melanopsin, and it's present all across the animal kingdom in various ways. And it's a photosensitive chemical, and it is what triggers the circadian response in many animals. And it's entirely blue sensitive. That's its response curve there plotted on a spectrum. Melanopsin really doesn't see yellow light. It doesn't really see red light. It sees blue light. And in the human being, melanopsin is located, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, it's located in the retina of our eye. It has nothing to do with our visual perception. It isn't in the red or the green or the blue cones or the rods that are providing our vision for us. It's in another nerve cell type, but it directly talks to our internal clock. It sets our internal clock. It also does weird things like helps adjust the size of your pupil, but it's not a visual system thing. But again, entirely blue sensitive. So when we talk about reducing shortwave light, reducing green and blue light for dark skies reasons, gosh, we've already done something very helpful in the conservation reasoning. I don't think I put a slide in for it here. I will say that it's not the absolute everything for every living thing. Again, I remember years ago, the sea turtles were one of the first animals to be a poster child for nighttime conservation concerns, because they were going to go extinct if we kept on lighting up the beaches improperly where they lay their eggs, and because the young were just not surviving that. In one of the many studies that went on at that time, I found it very interesting. It was showing how much safer using amber or red lights was. in these beach areas as opposed to regular lighting. But it did note that there was one species of mouse that lived on the beaches on the Atlantic coast of Florida that was more attracted to the yellow light. So it was more disruptive to these little beach mice to have yellow light. So it comes back. I probably put this on the last slide or something, but to kind of an old truism that it doesn't get said very much because it sounds so radical, but from nature's point of view, any man-made light at night is light pollution. Any man-made light at all is light pollution. It doesn't do any good. It does disruption instead. So let's see, what did I put next? Oh, I tossed the light spectrum page off of the FDSC website here, just to reiterate this fact that the amber light sources we're talking about up toward the top there, what's the benefit of those? They don't intrude into the greens and certainly not into the blues as much as the LEDs do down below there. So in choosing light sources in the amber majority spectrum, we're inadvertently also doing something very positive from the nighttime conservation, the ecological point of view too. Here's one you've known forever. They've been painting light bulbs yellow for longer than I've been around to not attract insects at night, because what are the insects attracted to? To the shorter wavelengths of light. Why do you in your bug zappers, you don't even use blue light, you use ultraviolet light to be even shorter wavelengths yet. So the shorter wavelengths, and nobody understands why that is, quite frankly. I've been studying entomology for quite a while, and there is no good explanation for why bugs are so hopelessly attracted to ultraviolet light when there's no ultraviolet light sources at night to normally that they would be going to for any natural reason. It just short circuits them for some reason or another, and they go toward them. But again, the longer wavelengths, nowhere near as much of a problem. So in conclusion, for my little spiel part of this, I think it's important when we think about this mess that we've made of the skies that we also think about everything else that's living around us that's also affected by that stray light of ours, by our excess light. Again, really by any light that we shine outside at night, but certainly much more egregiously by light that we're shining out in a huge gluttonous mess of excess. And again, there we go. I knew I stuck it on here somewhere. It's hard to be a conservationist and not be accused of people saying, well, you're just saying all people should go and die and just leave the planet. Well, I guess if you wanted to make the bats happy, we would do that, but that's not realistic. But I still strongly believe that even if you're not promoting extremes like the concept there shouldn't be people anymore, you should accept when there's facts like this one that we're not doing anybody a favor by having man-made light out in the natural world around us. And at that, I was just going to see where this leads. If people have things they want to chime in. If you have questions, I can try to, if I can get my brain to retrieve things that I've read or whatever.
Thank you, Drew.
I guess I could just stop sharing since there's only a few of us here. So
yeah, then everybody can see who's here. Thank you, Drew. That was really good. It's not really a question, but I wanted to point out that the place that we try to land in between where the world is today in terms of how it uses light pretty carelessly, as you've pointed out, and the other extreme where we say turn out all the lights and maybe leave the planet as well. There's plenty of room in the middle, I think, more than most people realize. If you do lighting sensibly, it's really, I think in the last 5 years, becoming clear how much better much better the world can be overall, how much those deleterious impacts can be reduced. It's not just a little bit. I mean, you may cut the light down by, I don't know, 10%, 20%, or you may think of numbers like that. Like, to get the Energy Star certification for your computer, I think it has to only be a few percent better than your average. Those are the usual kind of numbers that are floated around a lot in environmental efforts. But in fact, in light pollution, if we shield lights and use amber lights and don't use too much light, in some measures, we're reducing our impacts by 90% or more, down to 10% of what it is. And so it's still 10%, like you say, Drew. Every bit of light that's introduced by us into the natural environment is something that the world did not evolve with. We're natural organisms, so I don't know it's not natural that we produce lights. But what we mean by artificial light is, it's by us. But
well, I think
it can be reduced dramatically.
Yeah, on that note, I would, I guess it was my noting to you, Chris, a while back that I think we should compare light pollution to the other environmental issues that our culture has created, and remember that because of focused efforts of the public becoming aware in my lifetime of the dangers of other forms of pollution, that a lot of things have been done. I mean, we had Silent Spring talking about chemical pollutions and things, and awakening society's awareness of those things at all. I mean, it was 100 years ago, you could buy cyanide at the drugstore. It was a lot. Things have gotten a lot better in other areas. The air in the United States is a lot cleaner than it was when I was a kid. The water is a lot cleaner in many places than it was when I was a kid. But nobody has stopped and talked about this kind of pollution really on a major cultural level. It's something we take for granted. I talk about it when I give presentations in the town a few miles over this way that I grew up in. I lived near the river that flowed through our town and coming down from the north through many other little towns. And when I was a kid, we'd play by the river, and there was raw sewage floating down the river. This is in the early 1960s. And the next town up the road did not treat the sewage when it went into the river. Nowadays, we would think, well, that's unbelievable, the United States, you'd have a place like that. And it took the public waking up to the fact that it doesn't have to be that way. There is a way you can, it's obviously, when you look at it, it's like, well, it shouldn't be this way. But people think, I think our tendency is to think, well, they wouldn't let it happen if it was as bad as it looks. Or that must be the way you have to do it. There must not be a solution. But when the public wakes up to the fact that it doesn't have to be that way, and that they didn't know what they were doing when they let it get it that way, those they out there, where it's protecting you, things can change. So I think this can change too, with more public awareness.
I like that. I like that comparison, because to solve the raw sewage in the river problem, people didn't have to stop using the toilet.
No, not at all. And again, it's a problem where it slapped you in the face if you looked at it, and you think that they wouldn't let it happen if it was bad. Well, they were letting it happen, and it was bad. Nobody thought about it. Now we think about it, and that's illegal to do that. So that same river now has fish in it, and the water runs remarkably clear in it. And I played in it when I was a kid, even with the sewage. So, I'd feel safer about having my kids play in it today, So
are the reptiles that we think of, so most people think of course, because we're diurnal people, we tend to think of reptiles in the daytime, such as in your picture. Are reptiles generally diurnal, broadly, as opposed to the amphibians, which Drew, you listed, I think you said 80% or 90% were nocturnal?
Well, it's not a straight answer. And a lot of it depends on, of course, the environment. But so, for example, here in the desert, in the shoulder seasons of the year, like the spring and the fall, the reptiles that I work with, snakes, they're mostly diurnal. But as it gets hotter and hotter in the summer, and that's regardless of whether you're in flag or whether you're down in the desert, as it gets hotter and the days get longer and it gets warmer, the animals are more night active. So it shifts throughout the year. And I think in general, if given the opportunity and it's warm enough, they will be active at night. But in a lot of places, it's just not possible because of the heat. Just not sufficiently warm.
I know you've been thinking about plants.
I
Say
have
something.
been.
Think about plant. Tell us a couple things that you learned about plants at night. Like,
Well,
like Queen of the
yeah.
Night, or
Well, what I've learned just in the last 2 days, because I was thinking about giving a talk for you all, was about white flowers and how it's not just white flowers that need to that a plant needs to have to be pollinated at night. It also has to have smell. And I was learning about the moths and how they have not only this incredible eyesight to see in the dark, but they have this incredible olfactory system, which allows them to find night blooming flowers. So that was pretty interesting. I loved this talk, and I always learn from you guys, and it's so interesting. And one thing I did learn was about it's not only about having the correct lights outside, but it's about closing your shades at night so that your light from inside your house isn't blaring out, because I see that all the time. I have a lot of issues with my neighbors, and as Chris said earlier, I got so tired of complaining about it that we held a little, in kind of impromptu over the weekend star party just up the street, and we had a lot of people show, not a ton, but like 20, and among them was a person who seemed very interested and very excited to be there, and yet continues to have terrible lighting. So, Chris, we have to have another party.